community? This is Tommy, and welcome to another musical adventure. And today's adventure is going to be something I rarely do, but this is based on a discussion I was having recently with my good friend Sam St. John. Sam, hello. You know Sam. You've seen him here on my channel. He's got his own channel. Why aren't you subscribed to Sam's channel? Get over there and subscribe. Lots of great stuff over there. So, yeah, go check Sam out if you haven't done so already. And this is a discussion we were having a few days ago, and I love having these types of discussions. But we were talking about Bob Dylan and Bob Dylan's recent album, Rough and Rowdy Ways. And one of the things that we were talking about is where it ranks in the Dylan catalog. And I am not a fan of ranking things. It's just something I don't do very well. I either like something or I don't, but there's not a whole lot of this one's better than this. But for Sam and for you guys, I'm actually going to do something that I rarely do. I'm going to rank Bob Dylan albums of the last 30 years. I started thinking about this and I thought to myself, 1992 was the 30th anniversary Bob Dylan concert, Bob Fest. I think Neil Young called it. Neil Young, Eric Clapton, George Harrison, all these guys were there, Tom Petty, all on hand to celebrate the music of Bob Dylan. Well, it's 30 years later than that, and Bob Dylan has had a whole another 30 years since that concert to give us more music. Now, some qualifiers. I'm not counting bootleg series. I'm not counting albums that aren't like true Bob Dylan albums. Things like Good As I've Been to You, World Gone Wrong, the Standards albums he's done. I'm not counting those. I'm counting studio new Bob Dylan albums with Bob Dylan songs. That's what I'm looking at. So when I rank these and start looking, there are only six original Bob Dylan albums. Now, there's been a lot of Bob Dylan stuff over the last few years, but there's only 6. And so for the sake of this video, I am going to actually rank these 6. And after I reveal my ranking, I want to pose a question that's on the back end of this discussion, and I think it has some bearing on how I feel about these albums and why they rank where they rank. And so we're going to count up from number 6 up to number 1, my top 6 Bob Dylan albums of the last 30 years. Now, again, I'm not counting what I'm calling now, for lack of a better term, reset albums. I think that the folk albums from 92, 93, those albums were largely Dylan sort of resetting himself and getting set up for what was to come. And so we're going to start with my number 6 album, 2009, I believe, Tempest, number 6 for me. Now, before we go forward and before you start screaming and you turn your TVs off or whatever you're watching me on and you start just yelling at me, I think Tempest is a good album. I think it's a great album. But in this ranking, and for the sake of ranking things, which is another reason I don't like to rank things, this is number 6. And I'm going to tell you why I think this is the weakest of the 6. And the quality of songs are fine. I think Duquesne Whistle is a fun track. It's fun to listen to. There's a lot of great songs. Pay in Blood, Early Roman Kings. All of those to me are great Bob Dylan songs. Here's my problem with Tempest. Dylan's voice is absolutely shot. It's probably, to me, vocally. Now, I know Bob Dylan and his voice, whatever. You're not watching this video if you have an issue with it, but Dylan is especially gravelly and bad on this album. Of the 6, this is the worst vocally for me, and it is hard to listen to. Now, I say that. I love the gravelly Dylan voice of the last 30 years. It's my favorite. So, as a fan of that voice, this one's very hard. Listen to Roll On John. Great tribute. Again, the songs, nothing wrong with them. Vocally, not very good. Tempest, number 6. Number 5, kind of suffers the same sort of fate as Tempest. This is Together Through Life. Now this album, I enjoy this album. One of the reasons that it gets knocked You can tell the voice is getting shot, but it is co-written a lot with Robert Hunter. Nothing wrong with Robert Hunter. Robert Hunter fans, don't jump all over me. But to me, it's not as pure Dylan as the others are because of the co-writes. But the band sounds fantastic, and I love the addition of Mike Campbell and David Hidalgo from Los Lobos, who adds accordion. It's got a sort of Tex-Mex feel to it. So I love the sound of Together Through Life, and I like the songs, but it's number 5. Number 4, Modern Times. Now, these 3 all came out kind of around the same time. This was 2005, I believe. Modern Times. Again, this is a great record. I love songs like Nettie Moore, The Working Man's Blues, Thunder on the Mountain. Very cool Bob Dylan record. This was definitely, he was riding a wave coming off of the other ones. But Modern Times, again, throw a blanket over Together Through Life, this one, and you're pretty close. But not a whole lot to say other than I think it's a fantastic album. I love Modern Times. But there it is at number 4. Here's the top 3. Are you ready? This is kind of the impetus for this discussion. Number 3 for me is Rough and Rowdy Ways. This is the most recent Bob Dylan album that came out, featuring the epic Murder Most Foul. Foul. I sound like a Southerner, don't I? Murder Most Foul. It is. This album is definitely, and it's mixed, and this is kind of the impetus for this whole ranking here, is that for me, this is a very moody album. You got to be in a mood to put this on. It's more low key, but I love the songs, and I'll tell you, the Sinatra albums or the standards albums that Dylan has been doing did wonders for his voice. You can tell he did a little reset with those records. He sort of reset vocally about what he wants to do, how he wants to sound. I think he hasn't sounded this good in 10 plus years. So vocally, it's a lot easier for me to swallow this album. And like I said, musically, a little more low key. Like I said, the songs are, kind of more downbeat. There's not a whole lot of up-tempo songs. There's a couple on here, but for the most part, it is a low key album. But the songs, Key West, Philosopher Pirate, I Contain Multitudes. Again, I mentioned Murder Most Foul. There's some just classic Bob Dylan songs on here, and I enjoy this album. I think it's pretty great. Number 2 in my ranking of Dylan of the last 30 years. Maybe shocked at this one because you're probably thinking, I know what number 1 is. Time Out of Mind. This was considered, when it came out in 97, the huge comeback. It won Grammy for Album of the Year. It brought Bob back in so many ways. This was produced by Daniel Lanois. It's it's atmospheric. It's got some spooky production. It's got some songs like Lovesick, Cold Iron's Bound, a lot of like gloomy type songs. And this really, to me, just kicks off the sort of recent or latter period true Bob Dylan stuff. And it is an awesome album. I can't find a whole lot of fault with this album. Some of the bluesy type numbers, that just sort of straight ahead blues, they get a little drony for me. It's got an epic with Highlands, one of those long, droning like tone poems that Dylan is known to do. Really, really great album and fantastic. I can't find a lot of fault with it. Again, great album. So you probably know by now, so I'm not going to make a big reveal, but the number 1 for me, Dylan album, my absolute favorite Dylan album of the last 30 years is Love and Theft. It came out on September 11th, 2001. I've shared in other videos sort of the importance of that, the significance of that. We all know what happened on that day. I'm not going to dive into it. But as an album, I absolutely adore it. I love the sound of the songs, the way they come off. It's just phenomenal. And it's not only my favorite Dylan album of the last 30 years, it's one of my very favorite Bob Dylan albums of all time. It is a fantastic record. What I love about these recent Dylan records is that everyone talks about the great Dylan records of the 60s, the Blonde on Blondes and the Highway 61s and the Nashville Skylines, and then people talk about the Dylan albums, the Blood on the Tracks, and all these sort of milestone, Dylan albums. And I wasn't around for that. I was too young to experience the phenomenon of that. But I think it's great that we still get these sort of great classic Dylan albums. And Time Out of Mind may be a heavier album. This album's more fun. It's got some more jokes, and you know, so they go kind of head to head for me. But just for an album to put on, to listen to love, it's Love and Theft. I think it's just one of the best things Dylan's ever done. Now, having said that, here's the other sort of post-qualifier to all of this. I have seen Bob Dylan live in concert more times than anyone. I believe 14 times now over the last 20 years or so. I've seen Bob a lot. But that period between 2001 and 2005 is probably when I saw Dylan the most, multiple times that year. And a lot of the songs that I heard live on those tours, and you can go back and look at the set list, were songs from Love and Theft, Time Out of Mind. By the time Modern Times came out, in that little period, I'd slowed down with my Bob concerts and wasn't attending them much. I did see a few here and there, but those albums, that period between Modern Times and Tempest, I didn't see Bob nearly as much, and those songs I didn't hear as much in concert. And so that brings us to the new album, Rough and Rowdy Ways. I saw Bob Dylan this year, recently, and it was a great show, and he pretty much did the entire album live in that concert, with the exception of Murder Most Foul. That's the only song he didn't do in the concert. So I heard that entire album live in some form. And so I think sometimes, and this may go not just for Bob Dylan, or maybe especially for Bob Dylan, hearing those songs live in a live setting, I think maybe has some sort of influence or sway on how we feel about those albums. Sam's favorite is Tempest. He loves that album, and that's his first sort of Bob Dylan album that really opened Bob Dylan up to him, and he loves that album. Obviously my least favorite of the six, and for reasons like I mentioned earlier. But again, I've only heard a couple of those songs live, since it came out. I think that has some bearing. At least it does in our cases. How do you feel about it? Comment down below. Am I full of crackers? Where am I with this ranking? Is it just totally, do I not know my Bob Dylan? I would argue that I do, but that's my feelings about it. What do you think? Tell me down there. The comment section. I love these kinds of discussions and debates. So get in on the action. Do your own ranking, if you will, in honor of Sam. You won't get many ranking videos from me, but here you are, Sam. You squeezed one out. And tomorrow, it all may change. Tempest may become my favorite. So I do sort of give the caveat that I may and will change my mind. But as of right now, that's my top 6. Guys, like the video, subscribe to the channel. You know the drill. I love having you along for the ride. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.